Okay, so this is the first episode of this podcast where I'll be talking a little bit. It's going to be a small intermediary podcast after all the dialogues. When I started this podcast, I started in French, and then English came because I had a few requests for having those dialogues in English. And basically the idea was to really go into the reasons for photography by photographers of really different horizons and backgrounds. And it was also part of another project where I was trying to put in place a production infrastructure for podcasts for the Photo Genève Festival, the Photo Geneva Festival for photography. And basically, I started doing those 15 minutes dialogues where I ask photographers of all levels what brought them to photography, why they practice photography, how important it is to them. And basically I found that super interesting, and I got the feedback that was really interesting. So continuing on that concept. But this episode is a little bit different because I think every month I'm trying to have more inspiration, maybe have some thematics that could come up for the dialogues, and have a greater link to other questions that I have on the YouTube channels. Basically, I have, again, French and English. This podcast is in French and English, including this episode. But the YouTube channel has the video version of those podcasts, which aren't very interesting per se, because it's basically not meant to have any interesting images, but you will see the dialogue, how people actually react physically. It's always interesting to see if people smile or their gestures like this, seeing the hands. Anyways, but once a month, I think for the first week of this podcast, there will probably be some dialogues too, but it will be a special episode every month where I kind of link to the thematics that I went through on the YouTube version. And basically on the YouTube channel, there's something that I find interesting. It's AIs Hit. It's about artificial intelligence and photographers and photography. And that's a channel which has had quite a few episodes already. It's basically, if you type AIs Hit, AISHIT.net, it brings you directly to the English playlist of the channel. Every week I try to focus on one photographer of the past or present and try to have AI explain and illustrate the works. So basically, the last episodes were Tina Modotti, Sebastian Salgado, Rineke Distra, Helmut Newton, Nan Goldin, Xanthi Shavinsky, etc. There's something like 16 photographers that have been going through this process until now. And I basically asked ChatGPT, which is this kind of popular AI chatbot. I ask it to tell me more about the bio of the photographer and then explain what it believes makes the style of the photographer different from others, with more or less success. Anyways, ChatGPT tells me things, and I put this information into then Dall-E, basically OpenAI, and for the last episodes, Midjourney, and I asked this artificial intelligence to illustrate. And I think it's really entertaining. It's also a good pretext to go look at the real work and the real bio of all those photographers, remind us that they exist, or just make us aware that they exist. Some we know, so it's interesting also to see how efficient AI is. I don't think it's very efficient. It's actually pretty bad. But it's entertaining, at least for me. That's at least one point. But I think it's pretty entertaining and fun to look at what AI understands. I don't know how to put that word, but or if there's a better word, understands a photographer and its style. I think many photographers are scared today of being replaced by AI. I think AI is going probably to replace a lot of people in the future. In photography seems to be one of them, one of those fields. But in the meantime, I think it's pretty bad. So it's interesting to see the progress also. Yeah. So you can go check for yourself and don't hesitate to give your opinion on it. Otherwise, the podcast, sorry, I forgot to talk about that before, but this first episode of the month is also going to be a mean for me to tell you about the Wordhunt. Since the beginning of the 2000s, we've had this monthly ritual of meeting with other photographers, or just go try to take pictures, find inspiration in 3 words, randomly chosen. Originally, we were actually writing them down on papers and randomly picking the small papers, but now it's online on the website on the Photo Collective website or the Instagram account. And for the month of April, if you're lacking inspiration, 3 words you can go hunt and create pictures for. It's future, safe, and newspaper. So you can try to make pictures of, well, anything that relates to those words and try to improvise on those, either separately or in common. You could maybe find something a photo that expresses future, safe, and newspaper at the same time. And it's a good pretext. It's a good pretext for you to go and take pictures of things you didn't think of. It's a good exercise, and it's also a good way to pretext to call friends that also like photography and go for those word hunt together. So, or actually just look together at what the images, what they convey, and the results. Anyways, going back to the YouTube channel and this first of the month's podcast. Besides the AIs Hit playlist, there's the Voncam playlist. So if you type Voncam, voncam.net, that's where I talk about equipment. I think in the dialogues we also talk about equipment. It's a good pretext also to talk about photography. Originally, it's for my own practice. I like testing cameras, lenses, old devices. And so since the beginning, there's an older channel where I already used to do that. It's not on this one, but it's anyways. Right now on the new YouTube channel, if you go on the Voncam playlist, there's already something like 19 videos in French and in English. If you choose you have the links on both YouTube channels, where I talk about lenses, weird lenses, old cameras, often Leica M style and old manual focus lenses, or also point and shoots. I like all those cameras, testing them and trying to figure out if I can do something interesting with them and try to convey my experience with them. So last month, the last episodes were about this focus-free lens, the Chroma double glass M39 mount lens. It's 24 millimeter cap lens, basically. Really great, it's cheap, fantastic rendering in my opinion. And I'm also talking about the Leica M1 and MDAs, those two lesser known Leica M cameras, or the Holga lens for DSLR. Some kind of cheap toy lens for DSLRs. But yeah, it goes through lots of equipment, so I would recommend to go and check. And if you have comments or requests, don't hesitate. Many of those tests, I take months to do them, so I'm currently working with diverse cameras I didn't publish anything about yet. So if you have if you give some feedback, I might speed process one of these that I've already started, or turn it a little bit more into your desire. And yeah, that's something I will be talking about, but only for the preceding months. This episode is the first time I'm doing it, so I'm going a little bit through everything. But in the future months, I'll only be talking about the previous episodes of those channels. Then there's also the Serial and MatNum playlist channels. These are pretext to talk about photography inspiration. I focus obviously on my preceding months' experience, and it's separated. Serial is about, let's say, traditional photography, digital or analog, but I don't really focus on how the image is made. I mean, how the texture or the processing. I'm not focusing on this. I'm focusing really on using the equipment, taking the picture. It might be studio, it might be travel, it might be street photography, and that's with illustrations. And the Serial playlist is a good pretext to talk about how you get inspiration, how you work on a project, how you have doubts, and that might serve as a base for the dialogues in the future. The Serial playlist is when I test and I work on a subject for a phone cam. You will see some of the photos from the test of those cameras, lenses, and films while I'm doing it. So, for example, if I'm testing a new film or a camera I'm not acquainted to, I will test it for a long time. So I will take pictures once in a while, and those photos will appear in the Serial channel or playlist. So yeah, same thing. Don't hesitate to give some feedback. YouTube is better for the feedback, of course, but Instagram works too. And yeah, it's also digital and analog. And right now I'm having this kind of streak. I didn't publish anything yet, but about digicams. They're super popular online. It's some kind of trend right now. Some people say there's no bad cameras. Honestly, I think there are some bad cameras. You can make good stuff with it, but there's some really terrible digicams. So I might show some of them. I'm going to focus obviously on the ones I find interesting in one way or another. And I'm not only talking about grainy results or low res and blurry stuff. There are some really bad digicams. So I'd be interested if you have some ideas of some that might be of interest. I've got a pretty big list right now. I'm testing a few pretty cool stuff, but that will be coming up in the future. And then MatNum is that playlist channel where I'm a software developer for photography, so I develop filters and different user experiences for taking pictures. Originally for my own practice. That's part of my thesis is that digital matter, the sensor is not that different from film. You get grain, you get certain characteristics, both color, geometry, image rendering, contrast, whatever. And so this playlist channel, I'll be going back on the previous thematics of this MatNum playlist also. Can serve as a pretext too for our dialogues. But I will be talking about how you try to find inspiration for creating a treatment of an image, how you're going to want to process it or distort it or capture it. And that's part of I think my interest and hopefully yours into this digital matter thing, where I will try to relay what I work on and how I imagine capturing the images using digital sensors and obviously camera phones, smartphones, and how I will try to create some texture and create something that means something artistically or sensually using those incredible cameras we have on our smartphones. So yeah. So basically, that was a special episode of the podcast. No dialogue this week, but and obviously also this podcast is. I'm going to try to. I'm not into a dogmatic approach of trying to create the always same formula. And I really like the dialogues. I think many of you do too. I want to try to find a way to implement more regarding that. I've been planning to do this multi-participant podcast for a while. I think this first podcast of the month is going to be a good startup thing to create the thematics for those in the future too. So the first of the month might be this public grouped dialogue, but we'll see how it goes. And yeah, thanks. Hopefully you find that entertaining. Don't hesitate again to get in touch and give me your feedback. And see you next week.